Melo, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Look forward to it.
Why do you think burnout is increasing around the world?
It definitely is increasing, and it's multifactorial. There's so many reasons, but I think one of the main reasons is we are just always on. We're always switched on. We have this never-ending to-do list, always accessible to people. We can't switch off. We have our laptops, telephones, pretty much 24/7, and we're not designed for that. We're not designed to be on all the time. So definitely one of the reasons that we're always accessible. So I see in a lot of the work that I do, especially with executives, CEOs, high performers, they don't give themselves permission to stop. They don't give themselves permission to pause. So it's not sustainable. And the end result is burnout. And burnout is usually cumulative, slowly over time. And sometimes we don't notice it's happening. And then suddenly the end result is burnout. Number two is I think we still have a bit of a residual mental health hangover from COVID. Like it doesn't just go away. A lot of our resilience has been worn away. We're still running on a bit of empty, still a bit exhausted. So we have this sort of residual hangover that's still there. We don't suddenly pop out of a 2-year pandemic and then everything's fine again. So many of us are still operating with a half empty cup. That's another reason. And another reason that I see is a lot of people are sort of lacking that purpose and mission and drive and just going through the motions and, looking for the next thing just to keep them going, and they don't have that internal driver. So there's a few reasons for sure.
Do you think some executives, you mentioned those CEOs and the people that you coach, do you think stress can become a habit? And it's a pretty bad habit, but it becomes almost ubiquitous. It's like, if I'm not stressed, something's not right.
Yes, yeah, exactly. And it's addictive. It's addictive to that busyness. I coach many doctors and surgeons, for example, and many other high performers, like I mentioned, CEOs, executive general managers, and they're just used to being busy all the time, being on all the time. Like I said, we're not designed for that. And they think that if they're not doing, they're not performing. But sometimes the very thing we need to perform better is actually to stop and to pause and to, have a little break. So our next 2 hours will be more productive. So it's this always on, always switched on, this feeling. I've had clients that say to me, "Oh, meditation is not going to help me because I just find that actually slows me down." But actually, that's what you need to do to slow down,
Yeah.
then to speed up again.
Yeah, yeah. You need to get used to the feeling of slowing down so that at least there is some contrast in your life. Because if it's all go, 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 well, it's obvious that at some point the energy is going to run out and you're going to find yourself feeling. I mean, it's obvious to us, but when you're in the thick of it as an executive who's been under pressure with relentless KPIs and relentless targets, I mean, that never ends. I sometimes laugh when I see tech teams and they talk about we're starting another sprint. And I ask, well, how often do you recover from the previous sprint? It never
Yes.
happens. I mean, it tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, exactly. It's like a marathon runner just finishing the marathon, and then okay, let's go for the next one, and let's do a 100-meter sprint in between that, shall we? And let's do another 400-meter. Right, it's exactly like that. We need to switch off. I always think of those, those NutriBullets, those smoothie makers
Mm,
that have
mm.
this machine that oscillates at a very high frequency. It's designed to do that. It's designed. You put in your blueberries and strawberries and yogurt and all that in there, and it actually is designed to oscillate at this very high frequency. But what would happen if we left that on for 5 minutes or 10 minutes?
Yeah,
It's going to burn out. It's the same as
yeah,
us. The stress response is only designed for short term stimulus. It's only designed to get us through that situation, to finish that job or finish that goal. But then we need to rest and recover. But most of us just keep that cog spinning continually until the end result is burnout, just like that NutriBullet.
yeah. That's a good visualization. What does balance mean to you?
I always think about balance as a daily thing. A lot of people think about balance as like, you work 12 months or 11 months and then you have your 4-week holiday at the end of the year and then you fall sick on the first week because your nervous system's shot and then you sort of reclaim yourself and then you go back
Yeah,
again. I actually don't see it that way at all. I see balance as a daily thing, a daily habit that we need to maintain. So it's balance is having periods of being on, switched on in what's called the beta mode. We're thinking, planning, problem solving, decision making, doing all those things we need at work. but then also periods of off through the day. So off could be just a little walk around the block, or it could be, doing a meditation practice. It could be a 2-minute practice. It could be whatever it is that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. So in life, we're often activating the sympathetic nervous system, which is that fight and flight response. So we're on, all day long, on. And then it's a long time to come down. Whereas we can find balance of having periods of on, and then a bit of off, and then a bit of on, and a bit of off. So we actually can manage our energy on a daily basis to find balance. So we're not exhausted at the end of the day. So we're not exhausted at the end of the week. And many people get to the very end of the week on Friday, they've got nothing left in the tank, and they use the whole weekend to recover, or they keep working, and then they're still exhausted when they go in Monday. So balance to me is a daily habit to maintain, and ask yourself, how can I find, these periods of on balancing out with periods of off?
I love that. I love that. Do you think there are times in life, such as when you're in your 20s and maybe you're an intern in a company or something like that, where you've got the ability to bounce a little bit quicker than you do in middle age? So maybe it's worth putting in the time and the effort, knowing that it's going to help you and you're learning and you're passionate. But at a certain point, perhaps when you hit your mid 40s, I don't know where you are, I'm 47, where that kind of activity takes its toll and you start to find yourself, taking longer and longer to bounce. And I guess when you're in your 50s and beyond, it becomes a real issue.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I'm in my late 50s now, nudging
Are
my
you?
late 50s.
Wow.
Yeah, like nudging in there. And I do have that awareness of, like, I don't have the same stamina that I used to have when I was 20. And I don't have the same stamina. And I see this actually quite interestingly in a lot of the doctors that I coach, like I mentioned. So they work damn hard to get to where they are. They study hard, and then they have that stamina to do those 60 to 80 hour shifts, for that duration of time. And they get themselves on this treadmill of busyness, and they can sustain that in their 20s and 30s and maybe, even nudging early 40s. But then suddenly they don't have that same stamina anymore, and they start burning out in their 50s and 60s, and they unfortunately cannot get off that treadmill. So they're just always on there. So definitely 100%, we have more energy when we're, it's that yin yang cycle, isn't it? We're more yang when we're not more energy when we're in our 20s, and we can use that energy wisely. But then it's about, when we're nudging our 40s and 50s, listening to the body. This is where self-awareness and mindfulness is really important, to listen to the body, listen to when you need a rest, listen to when you need to be on, and find that balance there. Now, athletes are really good at that, by the way. Athletes are really good at being on, doing their sport, at high performance, but they're really good at active recovery. They're really good at, having those recovery periods. So my word of advice for people nudging their 40s and 50s is, like, listen to your body, listen to your mind, and find that balance as much as possible.
Mm-hmm. So before we go any further, perhaps you could share with our audience, who by now will be intrigued, who is Melo Calarco? Tell us a little bit about you and why you became interested in burnout and resilience and mindfulness.
Sure. Well, first of all, I'm a dad with 2 beautiful daughters. I live out on the Mornington Peninsula in Victoria, in Australia. A great dog called Coda, who I walk quite often out on the beachfront. He's a Swiss Shepherd. So I love the family life out here. Easy, sort of slow pace of life. It's a beautiful sort of rural area. Love traveling. Love, mixing and meeting cultures. I did cycle around the planet on my mountain bike once upon a time, where I learned many of my lessons. It took me about 2.5 years. So that definitely taught me lessons on resilience and rising above adversity and all those great lessons in life, which I now share in my professional work that I do. So in my work front, I'm a mindfulness and high performance coach, and I run seminars, workshops, one-on-one coaching to many of the world's largest organizations, many of the Fortune 500 companies. And I'm just on a mission to help and support as many people and companies as possible to perform at their best without burning out. Just giving them, including myself, for myself to perform at my best without burning out. So I have to walk the talk myself. I've worked in psychiatric clinics for about 20 years, also supporting, mental health, people suffering mental health issues, anxiety, depression, psychosis. So I also have tools and techniques that I support them. So just helping whoever I can along the way. And that's where my book was born, my book, Beating Burnout, Finding Balance. The idea to share this book around the world to also support that mission. And proud to say it's just won its 5th award. So it's actually doing well globally and getting some great messages around the world just to support that mission, to just help as many people on the planet to beat burnout and find balance.
I love it. And it is a fantastic book. The link is in the show notes, so everyone do get a copy. It is brought to you by Wiley, and it's packed full of practical tools. And what I really love about it is how you frame different concepts based on locations and places that you traveled. Can you share a few of the destinations and places that really shaped your perspective on resilience and mindfulness and some of these topics? What stands out?
Yeah. There's many that stand out, but you are right. We're speaking from experience when we're sharing some of these things. There's nothing like a real story that you learnt the lesson from. So many countries for many reasons all stand out for me. But what does stand out for me was the high Indian Himalaya. So up in the it's called Ladakh, which is the North Indian Himalaya. Beautiful landscape, beautiful people. It's actually on the Tibetan plateau, and some of the purest forms of Buddhism exist on that planet. Are up there. So wherever I was in my travels, I would stay with indigenous cultures if I could, learning from the pygmies in Africa to the Dogon people to a whole range of different cultures, but also I'd immerse myself in the spiritual practices of those regions. So if I was in India, I'd visit the temples and stay there. Up in Ladakh there that I mentioned, staying in the monasteries and temples and just immersing myself in the meditative practices, learning from the monks and the elders out there. So all of those experiences shape who I am. And I'm on a perennial journey just to sort of discover who I am deep inside and get to know myself, as much as possible. So I also visited many sort of martial arts places because I'm into the martial arts and the internal arts, which I've been practicing for about 30 years. And all of these things sort of shape who I am and what I do. In terms of resilience and in terms of near-death experiences, there's a few of those I could share with you, including one that I shared in my TED talk where I had a machine gun in my ribs in Rwanda, traveling on the back of a truck, with drunk armed soldiers. And I was in a situation where it was wrong place and wrong time, basically. And there's a bit of political unrest in the area at the time. So I was in a situation where I had to really think on my feet. And what I did was actually did a breathing practice. So I did what's called 3 mindful breaths before I made any decisions. So to get myself out of that situation. I'll let you watch the TED talk so you can get the full details of that. You can actually have a listen to that in more detail. But yeah, all of these experiences, shape who I am, near-death experiences, but also beautiful experiences of, the kindness of strangers, the hospitality of people around the world who seemingly have nothing, as in financially, very bare minimum, but they just give you everything. And for that, I'm eternally grateful for.
Yeah, I had similar experiences. I think you've been further off the beaten track than I have, but certainly in places like Nepal and India and Bangladesh, places where you see real poverty, yet people will have you come to their home and you'll sit on the floor with them and they'll cook what they have, and it's often delicious, except this one place in India. I was crying from the spices. I had no tissues. There's not tissue paper and stuff in India. So I was using camera lens cleaner to wipe my eyes. And they look at me with curiosity, like, well, do you not like the food? It's like, I like it very much, but no to the seconds. But it is incredible what you realize is that most people are curious and most people are kind. And the world is very different from what you read in the news.
Yeah, very rarely. I traveled with a tent and all my backpack and everything on my bike. Very rarely did I have to set up my tent because very often I'd enter a new village and the children will all follow me behind a little convoy and, laughing and smiling. And then someone would invite me into their home, like you said. And then before you know it, you're sleeping there and they're feeding you. Nothing like that, hospitality was just amazing. But like you, some of those meals were pretty average and some of them were actually, I'll be sick for a week afterwards. I remember in also up in the Himalaya, there was a place there, a little hut that you sort of stayed in. They invited me in and I had to drink their local, it was called Chang it's like an alcohol, which is like a yak butter tea, and it was
Okay.
horrendous. It was horrendous. But to be polite, I had to drink it, and that was a big honor to drink it with them. Yes, of course, I was sick for a week afterwards, but again, I wouldn't change that experience for anything. So
Yeah, no, so many. It just reminds me of like pig blood and things like that. That people are like, we got a really extra special meal for you today. I'm like, I just can't do this. I'm like, oh my gosh, there's been some interesting ones. Oh, you need some water? Yes, water. Yeah, where's that from? It's from the well. Okay, here's a
mm.
week of. I'm not going to be good for about a week, but just do it. Where did your interest in meditation? Where was that sparked?
Yeah, initially, it's a good question. I was thinking about it not long ago, to be honest. And initially, I entered meditation through martial arts practices.
Mm.
So I was practicing Shaolin Kung Fu, and this is 30 plus years ago. And I very quickly learnt that the power of the mind was as important, if not more important, than the strength of the body. So, it's one thing to have, strong muscles and sinews and tendons and all those sort of, martial arts techniques. But I very quickly learnt through the internal arts that the power of the mind was really important. So that's where I spent the next 3 decades training the mind to be stronger, training the mind to be more present, training the mind to be more focused, and started entering the meditative practices. So, and some of that were combinations of Qigong practice, which is an ancient Chinese practice, Tai Chi, Chen style Tai Chi, some of the moving meditations, which will help me to sort of tune in the body and mind together. And then some of them are seated practices. I do a standing meditation practice, which I really love. It's still one of my go-to practices that I do today, and a whole range of different, meditative practices. So still on a journey, still discovering, still learning. And I can honestly say with my hand on my heart, I have not missed one single day of meditation for around 30 years.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So, for someone who's interested in creating these spaces in their life, for some, meditation conjures up images of sitting cross-legged, chanting, feeling tortured because it's so difficult to establish a quiet mind. But maybe that's one version. But what are some other methods that people might find more accessible?
There are so many methods. That's the thing with meditation. Saying the word meditation is like saying the word sport. If you say the word sport, there's hundreds of sports, right? There's football, there's badminton, there's
Yeah.
hockey, there's hundreds of that. So the
Mm.
same as meditation, there's, internal meditations, there's external, there's body meditations, there's transcendental meditation. So I think the first thing is to try a few different things out first, a bit like sport. You might try a few different sports and you might like one and not like some, and then find what suits you best. So I always try to keep it as simple as possible initially when I'm teaching somebody meditative practices. It could be just a very simple breath work where you're connecting with your belly breathing or diaphragm breathing just to connect with yourself, and then use that as a portal. I very often teach what's called a 90-second breath break, just 90 seconds or 2 minutes, that helps people realize that they can access their breath to regulate that parasympathetic nervous system there. So my recommendation is it's not a one size fits all. Try different things, explore different areas there, and find the one that suits you. Maybe you might need a meditation app to start with and listen to a guided meditation. I have a few meditations on an app called Insight Timer, but there's lots of great apps out there that you can actually listen to. So just try a few things and find what suits. For me as a meditation teacher, I'll try a few things with my clients and then see what sticks and see how they feel, because essentially they have to experience it themselves. They have to feel it. And sometimes it is work. Sometimes it is a discipline that you need to continue doing. But it is much easier if you find something that they enjoy.
Yeah. My first exposure to meditation was a yoga class. And someone dragged me along to a yoga class. This is about 20 years ago. And of course, I was thinking, oh, this is going to be weird. But it turned out to be transformative. It was in the final posture, in the Shavasana
Shavasana.
posture, that I, for the first time in my life, gained a kind of mental clarity. It was just, I walked out, I floated out of there, to be honest. And so that it can also be attached to something that's a little bit more active. You might go walking in nature and just sit down for a moment. As you said, there are many, many different ways. So be curious and find something that works for you. Any thoughts on devices like the Muse headband, where you can use biofeedback to shape your awareness?
Yeah, I think if that floats your boat, go for
Yeah.
it. Like again, there's the trouble. There's a trouble with technology sometimes when we're mixing technology and ancient practice. I think they're great. Whatever measures, if you're someone that likes measures and the science and the data, absolutely, why not? Like use any devices, watches, apps, Muse, headphones, whatever it is that helps you access that state. But what I will say though is we have it all inside of us anyway. Like we have the resources inside of us. We just need to sometimes sit with them longer. Sometimes we need to go through a bit of that practice. It's a bit like, I use the analogy of like learning how to ride a bike with training wheels. Like that's easy and it's a pretty fun experience, and you sort of fall off, but you get back on, you sort of, you don't quite fall off, which is great. It's going to be a pleasant experience and it gives you a tool, to learn to ride the bike. But eventually you've got to take those training wheels off. Eventually you have to take them off so you will fall down more often and you will fall off your bike, but you'll become a better rider. So if you're using any external apps or anything external that's supporting you, fantastic. But eventually try to train yourself to do the practices just on your own anywhere. So you can actually do the practice, meditation practice in a busy airport if you need to. You could do it on the bus if you need to, on the train if you need to, and you can access those states, because the great thing is we have a tool on us all the time that's always there. It's for free and it's your breath. And you can use your breath to regulate yourself at any time. And I'm not against any of those technological thing. Please use them, please do, but eventually take them off and just sort of find yourself and sit with yourself for a bit longer. You'll be surprised what you discover.
That's what I found. I got the Muse headband for a little while, and then I found I started seeking the sound of birds. I'm like, why aren't the birds tweeting? Because that's when your mind is supposed to be clear. I'm like, now I'm desiring after the sound of birds tweeting via. It's crazy. I mean, it's good for a little while to get you back into the habit, but then I was like, oh, let's go old school. So much better. But
Yes.
as you said, I think people, whatever works for you. If you need a little support, find it, and that's probably good. Yeah. What are some of the benefits of meditation?
Oh man, we could have a list of thousands and thousands and thousands of reasons, but what I hear from a lot of my clients actually is the byproducts that come from it. So the byproduct of practicing meditation regularly, sleeping better, number one, like getting a better night's sleep is, a lot of my clients will say, oh my God, Melo, I slept 8 hours last night. I haven't done that for like a decade, because we're processing our thoughts, our information. So the other great byproduct is exactly that, processing that information through that. So if you sit for a meditation practice for 10 minutes or 5 minutes or 18 minutes or 20 minutes, whatever it is that you're doing, your brain is processing data and information and uploading those things there. So when you go to bed at night, you don't have to do that again and you'll sleep better. So it's that processing and that self-awareness piece.
Yeah.
The number one benefit I find is exactly that, self-awareness, that really getting to know yourself on a deeper level, getting to know some of the triggers that trigger you, getting to know, your fatigue points, getting to know your stress responses, getting to know yourself on that deeper level. I've got books behind me on a shelf there that will give you thousands and thousands of more, reasons to control stress, to deactivate the amygdala, the stress response center. It's just endless, honestly. But the thing is, you have to do the practices. So many people know about meditation, they know about the benefits, and they might read books about it, or they might sort of dabble a little bit, but you have to continue the practices on a bit more of a regular basis to feel those benefits. It's like a marathon runner that says, I want to run a marathon and be able to endure however many kilometers it is that I need to endure, but they don't do the training, they don't run. It's the same as meditation. I want to get stronger with my mind. I want to get more clarity, more focus, more problem solving skills, decision making skills. I want to improve that, but I need to do the practices. So it is about doing the practices. So the benefits are, yes, I could fill up thousands and thousands of bullet points about it there, but I'll be here all day if we said that.
Absolutely. One benefit that stood out to me, I was reading through them recently, is an epigenetic effect where the telomeres are lengthened
Yeah.
and it slows down the aging process, which I just thought is absolutely fascinating. That sitting quietly and tuning into your thoughts and being aware can have that effect. But then it kind of makes sense as well. It's the antidote to the busyness.
Yeah, exactly. So the telomeres, as you know, they get affected by stress, so they get shorter, and that affects your longevity. So just by practicing regular meditation, you can lengthen those the ends of the telomeres and repair them. So if that's not a great reason, I'm not sure what is. So we can actually live a longer and healthier life. The other great benefit that I didn't mention actually is it helps us to slow down our thinking. And like I was touching on at the beginning there about our beta mode, that neutral bullet
Mm.
that's always on spinning out. Our mind is always on thinking, planning, problem solving. We're in beta mode. It's oscillating at about 14 to 40 hertz. Thinking, planning, problem solving, decision making, doing all those things. It's not designed to do that. When we practice meditation, and especially when we slow down our breathing and slow down that stress response and activate the parasympathetic, we drop into these other zones that you may have heard of and your listeners may have heard of, called alpha, theta, and delta. Now, delta is you're asleep, you're out, you're knocked out, you're totally asleep. But those two places in between, the alpha and theta, this is where new ideas come from. This is where creativity comes from. Our brain slows down to like 14 to 7 hertz as opposed to like 40, 50 hertz. And when that slows down, that's where new ideas come from. That's where creativity comes from. That's where sometimes you have a little break. It's like, I've got this great idea. So for anybody that wants to exercise their creative thought, dropping into those meditation practices can really help you to problem solve, come up with new ideas. To sum that up, Einstein says it really well when he says, I think 99 times, I find nothing, I stop, I swim in the silence, and the truth comes. Sometimes we need to just stop. Sometimes we need to just pause so we can get new ideas and new creativity.
I love it. I wrote something about that when I was in Nepal, which is the magic happens between thoughts. And if you are just a constant stream of consciousness, you never get those spaces for creativity to emerge. It's simple.
Exactly. Yeah,
Mm.
exactly. And that's what I find is one of the reasons that I meditate every single day. And if
Yeah.
you ask me what the biggest benefit is outside of the other thousands that we can talk about, is it helps you to create space between stimulus and response.
Yeah.
So that space, something happens, something fires you up, something affects you, something
Mm.
stimulates you, and then you have a response.
Yeah.
Very often, if we're not, if we're just on all the time, there is no space between that response. We're just on, we get reactive. But the more we meditate, the more space we can create so we can actually step back. We can look at the big picture. We can decide what the best thing to do in this situation is. So creating that space. I love what you said there, the space between the thoughts. Some people don't even notice the space between the thoughts. There is no space because we're just thinking all the time. But
Yeah.
when we create space, new ideas, even like brilliant ideas can come through. There's another state, by the way, that I didn't mention called gamma. And the gamma state is when the brain is oscillating at a high frequency, but the mind is still and subtle. And the research says that we can only access gamma with a quiet, subtle mind. Now, the gamma state is this high performance state. We're on, we're very switched on, we're very sharp. It's a bit like a finely tuned flute or finely tuned orchestra. Everything's firing at this perfect synergy together. And that gamma state is how we can access through meditation, through regular practice, brilliant ideas, almost like superhuman, super memory, these things that you wouldn't even think of on your busy day. They're just like, wow, where did that idea come from? Or absolutely mind-blowing super performance or super memory, heightened states of awareness.
And would that correlate with being in a flow state? Would flow state be gamma?
Also, yeah, when things seem effortlessly easy.
Yeah.
So an athlete might an athlete that does the same sport over and over and over and over again, does the same move, like let's say a footballer that does the same particular move all the time, they get that experience of flow. So they usually say to access these gamma states, we need to have regular practice.
Yeah.
So they measured it in monks, for example, that meditate thousands of hours in a year. and they measured the gamma states of their brains. In fact, there's a beautiful research that went on for like 12 years with a monk you may have heard of, Matthieu Ricard, and they measured his brain. So he was a monk who became he was actually a molecular geneticist who became a monk. And with his curious mind, they measured his brain. They put 226 sensors on his brain, and they measured the oscillations and frequencies of his brain. And he had the highest levels of gamma that the medical researchers have ever seen before. So that super performance, that very sharp, very on brain. But also the interesting thing was they also measured the highest levels of empathy and compassion and kindness in those regions of the brain too. So this flow state where everything's just effortless and easy, we're in harmony with ourselves, we're in harmony with the people around us. So a great reason to regularly practice meditation for sure.
Absolutely. I mean, you see great stand-up comedians, for example, and you're just, especially when they're doing crowd work, and you just go, how are they so witty and fast? But then what you don't see is that they do clubs every single night for years before the big event. So they've practiced.
Yes.
It's not just something that, not anyone could get to that point, but you can get to that point with any pursuit if you just dedicate yourself, put in the time, don't burn out.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't see all the work that went behind that particular. Yeah. He might say a joke, but he said it 1,000 times. He's rehearsed it. I went through that experience when rehearsing for my TEDx talk last year, so 2024 in March it came out. And yes, it was 8 minutes or 10 minutes on the stage, but I've got to tell you, it was about 3 months of continual practice, and I would have recited that over and over. My dog knew my talk very well because every time I walked the dog, I would recite it. Every time I was in the shower, I'd recite it. Anytime I was, doing things, I'd recite it. So I knew that talk back to front because I rehearsed it, then also visualized it through meditation, all those things. So there's that pursuit and that discipline. And I think that discipline is the biggest part of it, to do that regular practice, to do that regular thing. On the same note, though, you don't need the dedication of a monk to practice meditation. You don't have to sit for 20 minutes every day. It could just be 2 minutes. It could be a few minutes. It could be following 10 mindful breaths. But it's more the consistency of the practice, not the duration, that's going to give you the benefit.
We'll link to that TED Talk below. It is fantastic for everyone to have a look. Could you deliver it now if you had to, if you were put on a stage right now?
Yep. Yeah, I could.
Exactly.
Word for word. So here I am, about to embark on the journey of life. Yeah, I could word for word. And not long after that, I did another talk at a conference called Happiness and Its Causes, which is in Sydney. It's quite a big conference where the Dalai Lama has spoken at, Jane Goodall has spoken at. And that was even shorter. That was actually 6 minutes and 40 seconds, that talk.
That's tough.
And there's actually, it's called a Pecha Kucha talk. It's actually a Japanese concept which translates to chit chat. And basically it's every 20 seconds, a slide changes behind you automatically, and you talk to that slide for 20 seconds. So the full duration is 6 minutes and 40 seconds to do the complete talk, but you have to be spot on because the slides are automated behind you to get that talk. So I also have that one stored in my head too. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. I can recite that one to you too, if you like.
What are your thoughts? You touched on something that I didn't think of talking about today, but I think it's super powerful, which is visualization. How do you integrate visualization into your coaching? Is it something that you've been interested in? And, what potentially are some ways that people can visualize the future? And I'll just say this. A lot of people think, visualization woo-woo, but then they'll write a business plan. And what's a business plan? A business plan is a visualization, except it's just put on paper instead of you sitting down. And so tell us more. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like to take the woo-woo out of all the work that I do, to be honest. Like, it is about doing it. So yes, a lot of people might think of it as that. But if you think about all the Olympic athletes and high performers, they've visualized their thing over and over again. If you think about a diver, some of those high platform divers, they visualize the 3 twists and the turn and the pike over and over and over and over again. So when they do that particular thing on the day, it comes out. In fact, some of the I was hearing this recently. Someone was talking about it, that when that Olympic athlete comes and stands up on the podium to get their gold medal, yes, it's elating and it's a great thing, but they've actually almost anticlimactic because they have visualized it so many times in their head that they've
Yeah.
already lived it before it happens. It's like they've visualized it over and over again. So I'm a big one for visualization, but it doesn't, again, it's not a one size fits all. Like, it's, if that's what's going to work for you, why not? How I integrate it myself is, when I'm doing a meditation practice, usually, let's say I'm doing a 20-minute practice, or a 10-minute practice, I'll divide it into different sections. So the very first section of it could be just connecting with my body, connecting with my breath, connecting with my mind, just so I can sort of drop into myself. And then I might spend a couple of minutes on a visualization if I'm trying to achieve a particular goal. So it might be, something that I want to do, a talk or something like that. So for TEDx, for example, I definitely would have visualized myself walking onto that stage, would have visualized myself delivering the talk, visualized myself, the crowd cheering, visualizing it. So you get that sort of those cues in your body there. So I'll spend in a meditation, I'll spend that, but I always close the meditation coming back to myself, coming back to my body,
Yeah.
coming back to my breath, just to sort of ground myself back out again. So with visualization, it's almost like, if you can't see it, how can you do it? How can you achieve it? So the very first step is to see it over and over again. If you've got a goal in life, see yourself in that goal. See yourself with as much detail as possible. So if I am teaching visualization or doing it myself, you'd put as much detail as possible. For example, what do you see there with your eyes? If I'm doing the TEDx, for example, I see a crowd of people laughing and enjoying the talk. What do you smell? You might smell a particular smell there in that particular place. What colors are around? What sounds are around? And the more sensory experience you can make your visualization, the more real it becomes, and you become to embody it. So yeah, absolutely use it. But again, like I said, it's not a one size fits all. I don't use it all the time. It's something that I'll dip into and dip out of occasionally. But if I've got a goal in mind, usually I set myself a big goal each year. And if I've got a goal in mind, I want to see it. So this year, my goal is actually just to share my message across bigger stages around the world. So 2 years ago, my goal was to write the book, for example, and I visualized myself writing the book. I visualized it being published, and it manifested. And like I said, it's just won 5 awards, which is fantastic. Last year was to do the TEDx talk and some bigger talks. Now this year, my goal is to stand on bigger stages and share my message with a bigger message around the world. So my visualizations now are seeing myself standing on a stage with thousands of people in the audience, maybe in Dubai or America or Singapore or Hong Kong. So the more I visualize it, hopefully I can manifest it.
Amazing. And I'm sure you will. It's a message that people definitely will benefit from. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to co-present at one of those one day. Who knows? You never know
It'll
what
bring you
happens.
along. Visualize it first.
Yeah, I'll come and be a supporter, and then maybe the next year we'll get up on that stage. But no, I love it.
Absolutely, you're welcome.
How can we proactively build resilience? Because some people wait for the big challenge and then start looking at, oh my gosh, how can I deal with this? Any thoughts on proactively building our resilience capacity?
Yeah, again, on a daily basis, doing things that will support your. Don't wait for something to happen to then have a reactiveness
Mm,
to that. Same as stress. Like stress, most people won't reach out that they're stressed or burnt out until it's like the red zone, the red or orange zone. But it's ideally we're in those sort of yellow green zones, that the better zones, that we actually start being more proactive. So doing things for ourselves. So whatever you can do on a daily basis to build up your resilience, whether that's meditation practices, whether it's whatever things that you do to help you to self-regulate. So it's about self-regulation. It might be going for a daily walk every day. It might be, doing your sports or your hobbies or whatever it is that you like to stay present. A lot of it is around training yourself to be more present, to deal with what is happening and not the what ifs. So
mm,
I believe, and you've probably read some of the literature like The Power of Now, Eckhart Tolle, and things like that, where they talk about, the only time that really exists is the now, and we can always deal with the now. It's here. We can't deal with tomorrow or the next week or the next thing, and we start creating some of these what if scenarios, which starts wearing away our resilience, and we start
mm,
creating catastrophizing thoughts. So train yourself to be in the now. Train yourself to be more present. Train yourself to actually deal with the present moment as it unfolds, and believe in yourself that you always have the resources inside of you to deal with what comes up in the moment. So just proactively. And what does that look like? That looks like mindfulness training, for example, being more present with what you're doing. So many people, when they're going through their day, they're not present. Their mind is elsewhere. In fact, research says that 47% of the time, our mind is elsewhere. It's flicking away into the future, or it's going into the past, or it's going elsewhere. It's like a wild animal running elsewhere. So we need to train it to be more present. We need to train it to be here. And this is where the resilience comes into it. The other thing I'll say about resilience, I look at resilience sort of three ways. There's resilience to bounce back. A lot of people talk about to bounce back from adversity or bounce back from a difficult situation. That's one thing. That's resilience from the past to to grow from that experience, to learn from that experience. Resilience for the future, to set yourself up proactively, like you said. So you've got all these mechanisms and tools, but also resilience in the present moment. And that comes in the form of self-regulation, to be able to self-regulate in that moment. Like that machine gun story with machine gun in my ribs in Rwanda on the back of the truck, I had to self-regulate in that moment right then to come up with the best solution. But that didn't just come like that. That came from years of me practicing that. So how we can be more proactive, again, I know it's a long-winded answer, is actually to do more things in the present moment, and to your daily habits define you. So doing what you're doing in our daily habits. If you're someone that's reactive from the time you wake up in the morning and you check your telephone and you go into this reactive mode first thing in the morning, chances are the rest of your day will be reactive and your resilience is low. But if you're someone that wakes up in the morning and, let's say, does a mindful practice, a 10-minute meditation practice, tunes into the day, tunes into their body, our resilience is going to be stronger. So we can have that proactive approach.
It reminds me of someone in one of my workshops. We did a breathing exercise and she said, yeah, but how will I remember to use that in those moments when I need it? And I said, you shouldn't have to, because you practice every day. So in that moment, it's just an automatic response to challenge.
Exactly.
Okay, I've got this. It's like a rugby player doesn't wait until the big match to test out that technique.
No.
You've practiced a million times.
Yeah, and that's why I said before, it's not about the duration. Like, to be honest, it's not about, can I sit for 40 minutes and meditate? I do standing meditation for 40 minutes or an hour sometimes, but it's not about that at all. It's just about being able to stop and use that more often. So when I'm teaching someone that's starting out, I would prefer that they did 5 lots of 90-second breath breaks regularly. So they start turning on that muscle and that connection between their psychology and physiology that says, okay, every time I stop and slow breathe, I connect with myself, I connect with the moment, I can self-regulate. So for me, actually, the more frequently you do shorter practices, you start training your physiology and your psychology to connect. Like you mentioned with that person, you shouldn't have to think. It's just automated. So now typically I could probably self-regulate myself within 1 or 2 breaths. My body recognizes it. Okay, it's a safe place. I feel good. I'm grounded. Switches on the parasympathetic nervous system, the opposite of the fight and flight response. Switches on the relaxation response. 1 or 2 breaths is enough because my body recognizes it now. So the more regular practices you do, your body will get to know it. You'll get better at it.
And eventually your baseline will become calm. And every now and then you activate fight flight rather than the other way around, which is I'm always in fight flight and I need to use a tool to restore, like have little moments of calm. What you really want to do is rewire it.
Exactly. That's right. So the baseline is exactly right. Most people's baseline is already up. They're already stimulated from the time they get up by switching themselves on, telephones, working, all those sort of things. So we need to drop our baseline. So that's where the regular practices will keep you grounded, keep you in the moment, where you need to be. So we're not always in this reactive state. So regular practice is key. Definitely, it's something that I encourage.
What is a 40-minute standing meditation like?
Oh, it's timeless, to be honest. There's been times, honestly, where, so standing meditation is a practice. It's part of Qigong practices. It's a bit more sort of Chinese philosophies, what I learned through my master, actually. Standing meditation, you're typically standing in a posture, feet are about shoulders width apart, soft knees, soft hips, your arms are out in a particular posture. Sometimes they call it like holding a tree or hugging a tree. So your arms are up and you're in this beautiful posture. It's almost like you're just a vessel or a vehicle for energy to flow through you. At first, of course, the first time you train yourself to do this, you can't even keep your arms up for 2 minutes or 1 minute because your shoulders are hurting. But after a while, you learn to let go of that. You learn to, just sort of be in that shape there. And it's effortless. In fact, I've been in that posture for sometimes a couple of hours and I haven't even realized because my body has trained myself. And I remember years ago, I was I was working in a gym, actually. I was doing some rehab work and things along that way. And there was a challenge going on at the time. So there was an expo, or an open day or something at the gym, and they were doing these challenges like how long can you hold a barbell in front of you, in front of your body at chest level, as long as you possibly can to win the prize. And a lot of the big guys in the gym, big muscles and biceps and chest and all that, they'd hold it there. And after a couple of minutes, they'd be shaking, and after they'd have to put it down. And I'm not saying this to boast, but I actually did it and I held it out there and I could stay 10 minutes, 15 minutes, 20 minutes. No problem at all. I didn't want to show them up because I thought, oh my God, I'm the new guy around here. I don't want to show them up. But that was the discipline of me learning to tap into my breath, learning to use my body as a vehicle, and I could hold that weight and that barbell as long as I possibly could. So it's a discipline practice. So I love it. It's one of my go-to practices. In fact, I was doing a standing meditation in a park not long ago, and it was about 5 a.m. in the morning, really early before the whole day started. It was right on this sort of dawn light that was still dark. The sun was just coming up. I was doing a standing meditation. Like I said, your arms are out, like holding a tree. And I had my eyes closed. I was deep in the practice, and an owl came down and wanted to land on my arms. Like he wanted, and I was like, I just heard this sound to the corner of my ear, and there's this fluttering, and this owl was trying to land on my arm. I did open my eyes because I didn't know what it was. I thought maybe something's chasing me, and the owl flew away. But I was this place or this thing that the owl felt safe enough to come and land on my arm. So it wasn't a threat to him. I wish I kept my eyes closed. He would have stayed there for the rest of the practice. But the fluttering and the claws on my arm shocked me a little bit. So yeah, it's a timeless experience. It's beautiful. Try it out.
Absolutely. Yeah. That sounds amazing. Do you need a master, or could people find an entry point into Qigong just using YouTube or similar?
Yeah, but be careful what you do go look for, because there's a lot of the internal arts when it comes to Tai Chi and Qigong. A lot of them are just beautiful choreographed movements, which are beautiful to look at.
They are
fantastic, but they often lack the internal element. So the internal element is the diaphragm breathing, working through what's called the meridian system of the body. There's a lot of internal. I could walk across a park and I can see somebody doing Tai Chi and it looks beautiful, but I know it's empty. There's no depth inside. So it's more choreo. A dancer could do a beautiful, Tai Chi practice, and they can learn it quite quickly. In fact, I've taught it to dancers in the past, and they learn it really quickly, but there's no internal element of it. So yes, you can YouTube a little bit. It has to come from within. It has to come from inside of you, and to be able to build and cultivate that energy inside of you first, and then you translate that through your movement of the body. So, I teach it. I don't teach it as much as I used to. I'm quite busy with the other work that I do, but every now and again somebody seeks it and I say, yeah, why not? Let's do it. And I love it. Absolutely love to see the breakthroughs that come from it.
I wish I was a little closer. We're across the ocean. Otherwise I'd hit you up for a couple of lessons. But I think there's someone in my local town. I've seen a poster somewhere. So maybe it's time to reach out, because many years ago, a very wise person came to me and specifically said, you should do Qigong.
Oh, wow.
I think it's a call to action. So I'm glad you reminded me of that. Melo, thank you so much. People will be very excited to connect with you. Where would you like them to go?
Probably the easiest would be my website. So the website has a lot of free resources on there. It's got a few meditations. It's got a sample chapter of my book on there. So the website is my name, Melo Calarco, MELOCALARCO.com, melocalarco.com, but I'm sure you'll probably put that in the show notes for easy access. I'm quite active on LinkedIn out of all the social media platforms. Yes, I'm on the other Instagrams and Facebooks, but I don't use that as often. So LinkedIn is also a good place to connect with me under my name again, Melo Calarco. Yeah, feel free to reach out. Happy to support and help as many people as possible, like I said. And thank you for having me on the show.
As always, an absolute pleasure. Melo, please do everyone connect with Melo in the links in the show notes. Check out the TED Talk. Absolutely check out the book. And yeah, I look forward to doing this again. Thanks so much for your time.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you all.
See you.